You want to know what true, soul-crushing humiliation feels like? It's not tripping in public. It's not a bad haircut. It's not even being dumped. It's the sound of expensive wrapping paper tearing on a Christmas morning when you're 35 years old and realizing, with a clarity that feels like a physical blow, that you are an afterthought in your own family. The air in my parents' living room was thick with the scent of pine and expensive perfume. The towering tree, a flawless Fraser fir, glittered with heirloom ornaments that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My sister, Chloe, was perched on the edge of the cream-colored sofa, her designer cashmere sweater looking effortlessly chic. She was already filming on her phone, her voice a bright, performative chirp. "Okay, Dad, your turn. Open the big one." My father, a man whose affection was as carefully measured as his stock portfolio, beamed with pride. He loved this part, the grand gesture, the reveal. He made a show of hefting the large, rectangular box with the elaborate silver bow. It was for Chloe, of course. It always was. I sat on the floor, a half-empty mug of lukewarm coffee in my hands, a neutral smile plastered on my face. It was my armor, that smile. I'd perfected it over 35 years of Christmases, birthdays, and graduations where my achievements were met with a polite "that's nice, dear," while Chloe's were celebrated with champagne and new jewelry. My gift from them was already open. A pair of thick, woolen socks. They were practical. They were warm. I'd murmured a thank you, my cheeks burning. My mother had patted my hand. "We know you're always cold in that little apartment of yours, Maya." It was less a gift and more a critique wrapped in acrylic yarn. Dad finally tore the paper off Chloe's big present. He held up a set of keys, a sleek BMW key fob dangling from the ring. The logo caught the twinkling Christmas lights, a tiny, mocking star. "A new 3 Series. Dad announced, his chest puffed out. "Your old Jetta was a death trap, sweetheart. Only the best for a girl." Chloe shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy, and launched herself into his arms. "Daddy. Oh my God. Thank you. It's perfect." She turned and hugged my mother, who was dabbing a happy tear from her eye. The phone camera panned across their ecstatic faces, a perfect tableau of familial love and generosity. I felt like a ghost, a spectator to a play I hadn't auditioned for. Then my mother's eyes flicked to me.
"Oh.
"Maya, honey, there's one more little thing for you. Under the tree." Her tone was the one you'd use to distract a toddler with a rattle after giving their older sibling a pony. I followed her gaze to a small, lumpy package wrapped in cheap, cartoonish reindeer paper. It looked like an afterthought, which of course it was. My heart, already sunken somewhere in the vicinity of my practical socks, gave a pathetic little thud. Maybe it was something small but meaningful. A piece of jewelry from a grandmother? A book from my childhood? I crawled over and picked it up. It was light. I carefully undid the tape, a futile attempt to preserve some dignity. Inside a nondescript cardboard box, nestled in tissue paper, was a ceramic piggy bank. It was garishly painted, the kind of cheap trinket you'd pick up from a gas station for a last-minute gift for a child you barely knew. A $2 piggy bank. The silence in the room was deafening. The only sound was the crackle of the fireplace. Chloe had stopped filming. My parents were staring at me, their expressions a mix of mild curiosity and impatience, as if waiting for me to perform the gratitude they felt they deserved.
$62.
$2. The math of my worth, calculated and presented to me on the floor of my childhood home. The heat that flooded my face wasn't embarrassment anymore. It was rage. A pure, white-hot fury that burned away 35 years of placid acceptance. It was the final, insulting straw on a haystack of neglect that included every forgotten birthday, not just forgotten, but actively ignored. The year my mother had promised to take me to dinner, only to call and say Chloe needed her to babysit my nephew. The year they'd all gone on a cruise over my birthday week and hadn't even sent a postcard. 35 years of being the footnote, the backup plan, the easy-to-please daughter who never made a fuss. I looked from my father's proud face, to my mother's vacant smile, to my sister's smug, victorious expression. I saw it all with a terrifying, crystalline clarity. I wasn't family. I was furniture. I stood up, my legs shaky. The piggy bank felt grotesquely heavy in my hand. Maya, aren't you going to say thank you? My mother prompted, a slight edge to her voice. I looked directly at her. I didn't recognize my own voice when I spoke. It was flat, cold, devoid of the warmth I'd always forced into it for their benefit. For what? I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked out of the living room. I heard Chloe's stage whisper, God, what's her problem? She's so dramatic. I didn't go to my old room. I went straight out the front door, into the biting cold of their perfectly manicured driveway. And there it was, the BMW, glacier silver, gleaming under the gray winter sky. A monument to their love for her. A monument to their indifference for me. The keys were still in my hand. My father's Kering, with the BMW fob, was sitting on the hall table where he'd tossed it after the grand reveal. I hadn't even thought. My body had just moved, a puppet on the strings of a deep, primal hurt. I clicked the fob. The car chirped, its lights flashing a welcome. I got in. The smell of new leather filled my lungs. The dashboard was a symphony of soft, ambient light. It was the nicest car I had ever touched, let alone sat in. I started the engine. It purred to life, a quiet, powerful beast. And I drove off. I left my 10-year-old Corolla, with its passenger window that didn't roll all the way up and its check engine light that was a permanent fixture, sitting in their driveway. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. Tears I didn't bother to wipe, blurring the expensive windshield. I was humiliated. I was furious. I was heartbroken. But more than anything, I was free. In that stolen moment, in a car that represented everything I was not, I was finally, gloriously, acting on my own behalf. I drove for hours. The winter landscape blurred into a monochrome painting. My phone buzzed incessantly on the passenger seat. First calls, then texts. I ignored them all. Let them wonder. Let them worry. For the first time in my life, I held the power. I had something of theirs. It was getting dark when the phone finally stopped ringing. A few minutes later, it buzzed once more. A voicemail. The rage had subsided into a numb, hollow ache. Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled into a deserted grocery store parking lot, the BMW's headlights cutting two perfect beams through the gathering dusk. I put the phone on speaker and listened to my father's voice. It wasn't concerned. It wasn't asking if I was okay. It was cold, hard, and laced with a threat I'd never heard him use before.
Maya.
Return the car to the house immediately. Or, by first light, we will report it to the police as stolen. You have 1 hour. There was a pause. I could almost see his face, stern and unforgiving. Then, 3 more words, delivered with a chilling finality. Remember my name? The line went dead.
I sat there in the silent, stolen luxury, the words echoing around me. Remember my name. It was his signature power move. A reminder of his influence, his wealth, his ability to shape reality to his will. He wasn't just a dad, he was a man with a reputation, with connections at the police department, with a name that carried weight. And in that moment, something in me didn't break. It solidified. It turned to ice and steel. He thought that was a threat. He thought those 3 words would send me, his meek, forgettable daughter, scurrying back in shame, begging for forgiveness. But as I sat in that parking lot, watching my own breath mist in the cold air of a car I was about to lose, I realized he was right. I would remember his name. And I would make sure he remembered mine. The clock on the BMW's pristine dashboard glowed, 6:17 p.m. 1 hour. That's all the grace period I was afforded before being branded a criminal. A thief in my own family. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat, sharp and bitter. They'd given my sister the keys to a luxury vehicle without a second thought, but the moment I, in a fit of pained insanity, took it for a drive, it was a felony. The disparity was so vast it was almost comical. Remember my name. My father's voice played on a loop in my head, each repetition sanding down the raw, emotional wound and revealing something harder beneath it. Resolve. For 35 years, I had played my part perfectly, the uncomplicated daughter, the low-maintenance sibling, the one who never rocked the boat. I had accepted the socks, the forgotten birthdays, the backhanded compliments, because on some deep level, I think I believed it. I believed I was worth less. That I deserved their scraps because I wasn't shining, perfect Chloe. But that piggy bank wasn't a scrap. It was an insult. And this threat wasn't a lesson. It was a declaration of war.
I wasn't going to cry anymore. The tears had frozen in my veins. I started the car, that beautiful, purring engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. But I didn't turn toward my parent house. I drove toward my apartment, a one-bedroom box in a building with perpetually buzzing fluorescent lights in the lobby. I parked the BMW right out front, next to a dumpster. The irony was exquisite. Let the neighbors see. Let them wonder what Maya was doing in a car like that. I took the elevator up, the piggy bank still clutched in my hand. My apartment was quiet, a stark contrast to the opulent chaos of my parents' home. It was furnished with IKEA and thrift store finds, but it was mine. Every book on the shelf, every print on the wall, I had chosen. It was the one space in the world that reflected me, not who they thought I was. I placed the piggy bank on my coffee table. It sat there, a ugly, pathetic little monument. I stared at it, and instead of humiliation, I felt a strange sense of gratitude. Thank you for finally being so blatant. Thank you for finally being so cruel. Thank you for making it impossible for me to keep pretending. My phone rang again. It was Chloe.
Of course it was.
I answered. I didn't say hello. Did you bring it back yet? She demanded, her voice shrill. Dad is furious. You've completely ruined Christmas. Did I? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Or did the $2 piggy bank ruin it?
She scoffed.
Oh, don't be so sensitive. It was a joke. You know Mom and Dad have a weird sense of humor. You're so ungrateful. They let you stay here, don't they? They helped you with your security deposit on this place. There it was. The ledger of my life, according to my family. Every minor kindness was a withdrawal I could never repay, forever held over my head. The security deposit was an $800 loan 5 years ago, which I'd paid back within 6 months. But in their narrative, I was forever in their debt. The car will be back within the hour, I said, my tone flat. It better be. And you're going to need to apologize. A real one. Dad is talking about cutting you off. A cold smile touched my lips. Cut me off from what, Chloe? The socks? The piggy banks? The profound experience of being forgotten every single year on my birthday. You're being ridiculous, she snapped. We're busy people. You're an adult. Buy your own cake if it's that important.
Click.
She hung up. I stood there, in the silence of my apartment, her words hanging in the air. Buy your own cake. It was the final key turning in a lock deep inside me. She was right. I was an adult. A capable, intelligent, hard-working adult. I had a job I was good at. I had savings. Not BMW savings, but savings. For what? I'd been saving for a future that was supposed to include a family that might one day see me. But that future was a fantasy. An idea, wild and terrifying and utterly exhilarating, began to form. It started as a tiny spark, fanned by the winds of my anger and Chloe's dismissive words. Buy your own cake.
No.
I would buy my own damn bakery. I grabbed my laptop. I didn't open a banking app to check my balance. I opened a real estate website. I'd been idly browsing for years, a harmless daydream to combat the stress of work. My secret fantasy had always been a little place by the water. A quiet retreat. A lake house. I typed in the parameters. Within driving distance, but away from the city. 2 bedrooms. Waterfront. The listings loaded. There were cottages. Cabins. Some were fixer-uppers, some were move-in ready. And then I saw it. It was a small, modern A-frame, with a wall of windows looking out over a serene, pine-fringed lake. It had a deck, a boathouse, and it was priced at the very top of what I could possibly afford, if I drained my savings, my retirement fund, everything I had. It was perfect. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was insanity. This was the kind of impulsive, life-altering decision people like me didn't make. People like me weighed the pros and cons for a year and then talked themselves out of it. But the person I was 2 hours ago was gone. She'd been left on my parents' living room floor, shattered into a million pieces next to a reindeer-printed wrapping paper. I looked at the piggy bank. I picked it up. It was hollow and cheap. With a sudden, violent surge of energy, I hurled it against the brick wall of my apartment. It exploded into 100 ceramic shards, a satisfyingly loud crash echoing in the small space. I was done saving pennies for a family that valued me at $2. It was time to invest in myself. I found the listing agent's number. It was after hours on Christmas Day. It didn't matter. I called. A woman answered, sounding pleasantly surprised to get a business call. "This is Evelyn." "Hi, Evelyn," I said, my voice not shaking, not wavering. It was firm.
Certain.
The voice of a woman who knew what she wanted. "My name is Maya Thorne. I'd like to make a full-price offer on the A-frame on Willow Lake. I can have a wire transfer for the deposit sent first thing in the morning." There was a stunned silence on the other end.
Oh.
"Well, wonderful. Merry Christmas to me. I'll draw up the paperwork immediately. We can sign electronically." I gave her my information. I didn't hesitate.
I was all in.
I hung up the phone and looked at the broken pieces of the piggy bank on my floor. I didn't clean them up. I left them there as a reminder. Then I took the keys to the BMW. I drove it back to my parents' house.
I didn't slink in.
I pulled into the driveway, got out, and placed the keys squarely on the driver's seat. I left the door unlocked. I didn't look back at the house. I started walking. The night was cold and clear, and my breath plumed out in front of me. I called for a rideshare. As I waited at the end of the driveway, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Your father says all is forgiven. We'll see you for New Year's Eve. Don't be dramatic." I stared at the screen. All is forgiven. The arrogance was breathtaking. They had forgiven me for my reaction to their cruelty. The cycle was ready to reset. They expected me to come crawling back, grateful for their magnanimity. The headlights of my ride appeared down the street. I typed out a reply. It was only 2 words, but they were the 2 most powerful words I had ever written. "No, thank you." I got in the car. As we pulled away, I blocked all their numbers. Every single one. Then I opened my phone's calendar and found the date of my birthday. I set a reminder for that day, every year, for the rest of my life. The title of the event was Moving Day. The closing on the lake house was a quiet affair. I signed a mountain of paperwork, handed over a cashier's check that represented every dollar I'd ever worked for, and the keys were placed in my hand. They were cold and heavy. They were the weight of my freedom. I didn't tell a soul. I gave my landlord 30 days' notice, citing a change of circumstances. I hired movers for the few pieces of furniture worth keeping and donated the rest. My entire life fit into a 10-foot truck. As I drove it north, toward the lake, the city skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. It was the silence after storm. A profound, weary calm. The first night in the house was spent on a sleeping bag on the floor, surrounded by boxes. I built a fire in the stone fireplace and opened a bottle of cheap champagne, toasting to the empty room, to the future, to myself. The silence was no longer lonely. It was luxurious. It was mine. The weeks that followed were a blur of manual labor and simple pleasures. I painted walls. I assembled furniture. I learned how to light a pilot light and unclog a drain. I spent my mornings on the deck with coffee, watching the mist rise off the lake. I spent my evenings reading, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the call of the loons. I was, for the first time, completely and utterly myself. There was no one to perform for, no one to disappoint. The world had narrowed to the perimeter of my own property, and it was exactly enough. My family, of course, did not simply vanish. My unblocking of their numbers, a tactical decision, not an emotional one, was met with a tsunami of missed calls and messages. The tone evolved over time. First, it was anger. "How dare you ignore us? After everything we've done for you. You are the most selfish, ungrateful child. Then it was manipulation. Your mother isn't sleeping. She's so worried. You've broken your father's heart. We're your family, Maya. We love you. Finally, it was curiosity, laced with a hint of panic. Where are you? Your landlord said you moved. Maya, answer us. This has gone on long enough. I never replied. Their words were like stones thrown into my lake. They caused a ripple, but the water always stilled again. Their power over me was diminishing with every silent sunrise I watched from my deck. My birthday arrived. A bright, crisp day in early spring. The ice on the lake was finally melting, fracturing into 1,000 glittering pieces. True to my calendar reminder, it was moving day, not in the physical sense, but in the final, metaphysical sense. The day I would fully move on. I baked a cake. Chocolate with vanilla frosting. I bought a single candle and stuck it in the center. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, I lit the candle. I sat on my deck, looking out at the water, and I sang to myself. Happy birthday to me. My voice was soft in the vast quiet. It wasn't sad. It was a promise. The candle flickered, a tiny, brave light against the twilight. I was about to blow it out when I saw headlights cutting through the trees at the end of my long, private driveway. My heart stuttered. No one knew I was here. The agent had been discreet. The peace of my sanctuary was suddenly, violently, threatened. A sleek, black SUV, my father's newest toy, came to a stop in front of the house. The doors opened. Out stepped my father, my mother, and Chloe. They looked out of place, like exotic birds that had landed in the wrong habitat. My mother in her high heels, sinking into the gravel. My father in his cashmere coat, his eyes scanning my A-frame with an expression of pure, unadulterated bewilderment. They had found me. Chloe spoke first, her voice cutting through the quiet. What is this place? Some kind of cabin? She said the word like it was contagious. My father's eyes finally landed on me, on the cake, on the single candle. His face was a mask of confusion and dawning, ugly understanding.
Maya?
What is the meaning of this? We've been worried sick. You abandoned your apartment? You spent your savings on this. I didn't stand up. I simply looked at them. The fear I'd felt moments ago was gone, replaced by a cool, steady certainty. This was my home. They were the intruders. How did you find me? I asked, my voice calm. A private investigator, my father said dismissively, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Did you think you could just disappear? You are my daughter. Am I? I asked. It was always so hard to tell. My birthday was last week, by the way. 36. The candle on my cake chose that moment to sputter and go out, a thin wisp of smoke curling into the air. My mother's hand fluttered to her chest. Oh, Maya, we've been so distracted with things. With Chloe things, I corrected gently. I looked at my sister. How's the BMW? She crossed her arms. It's fine. This is insane. You moved to the woods because you didn't get a good Christmas present? You need therapy. I smiled then. A real, genuine smile. I am therapy. This is it. My father took a step forward, his businessman's eyes doing a quick appraisal of the property. The land, the waterfront, the house itself. I saw the moment his brain calculated its worth, and the even more startling moment he realized I'd paid for it myself. Without him. This is a reckless financial decision, Maya, he stated, his voice back to its familiar, condescending tone. You've drained your resources on an emotional impulse. You'll regret this. You can't manage this on your own. You'll need help. Our help. It was the same old song. You are incapable. You need us. I finally stood up. I walked to the edge of my deck, looking down at them. The height difference felt significant. Symbolic. I don't need your help, Dad. I haven't needed it for a long time. You just preferred to believe I did. It made you feel important. His face tightened. That's not true. We have always supported you. You have always managed me, I said, my voice rising slightly, not in anger, but in clarity, like a problem to be solved. A minor, inconvenient shareholder in the family corporation. Well, I'm resigning from the board. Effective immediately. I looked at each of them in turn. My mother's confused face, my sister's scornful one, my father's furious one. You gave Chloe a car for Christmas. You gave me a piggy bank. You showed me, in the clearest terms possible, what my value was to you. So I took that valuation seriously. I liquidated my assets, and I invested them in something that actually appreciates
My peace.
my happiness, my freedom. I gestured to the lake, to the trees, to the house behind me. This is my BMW. This is my grand gesture. I bought it for myself, because I remembered my own name. The silence that followed was absolute. They had no script for this. There was no precedent for my defiance. My father found his voice first, a low, dangerous growl. After all we've done, this is how you repay us? With this spectacle? There is no debt, Dad, I said, my voice final. The ledger is clear.
We are square.
You have the daughter you always wanted. I nodded toward Chloe. And I have the life I always needed. I picked up my cake. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to enjoy my birthday. On my own property. You are trespassing. My mother gasped. Chloe looked outraged. My father's face turned a mottled purple. For a moment, I thought he might actually charge the deck. But he didn't. He just stared at me, and I saw something new in his eyes, something I had never seen directed at me before. It wasn't love. It wasn't warmth.
It was respect.
And maybe, just maybe, a flicker of fear. He knew the game was over.
The rules had changed.
I was no longer a player on his board. I had bought my own table. Without another word, he turned. He walked back to the SUV, got in, and slammed the door. My mother and Chloe, after a moment of stunned hesitation, followed. I stood on my deck and watched their taillights disappear down the driveway, swallowed by the pines. The silence they left behind was deeper, sweeter than before. I took my cake inside, to the warmth of my home. I cut a large slice, sat by the fire, and ate it. It was the most delicious cake I had ever tasted. Outside, the first stars began to appear over the dark, still water of the lake. My house, my life. I had finally given myself the gift I'd always wanted. I had given myself a place where I belonged. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep into my bones, that I would never be forgotten again.